Professor Berhanu Nega. And thank you very much for being with us today. Professor Nega is the leader of the Ethiopian Citizens for Social Justice Party, EZEMA. He has had a long political and academic career in Ethiopia and the United States, including as president of the Ethiopian Economic Association between 1996 and 2000, and co-founder and head of the Ethiopian Economic Policy Research Institute. He was imprisoned for 21 months following the 2005 Ethiopian elections, in which he was elected as mayor of Addis Ababa for the Coalition for Unity and Democracy. Following his release, he went back to the United States and became a professor of economics at Bucknell University before returning to Ethiopia in 2018 and forming EZEMA in 2019. So, Professor Berhanu Nega, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me and can you see me?
Yes, both.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to try to answer the 4 questions that was posed by the organizers. Let me first thank the organizers for inviting me to participate in this forum. I'm asked by the organizers to address 4 issues related to EZEMA's expectations and ambitions in this coming election. But by way of introduction, let me say a few words about the larger global context in which we are trying to establish a meaningful democratic dispensation for the first time in our country before I get to those issues. I'm sure you know full well that this is not a very conducive global environment for initiating a democratic political order in our world. This is a time where liberalism as an ideology has been seriously challenged both from the left and the right, largely because of its presumed inability to deliver meaningful political equality and representation on the one hand, for example, in terms of issues related to race and ethnicity, and on the unmet promise of shared prosperity and equality of opportunity that it assumed to follow automatically from the dominant neoliberal economic policies that were pursued in the West and more or less imposed on the developing world since the beginning of the 1980s. This has largely alienated the working class in the West, as income and wealth inequality has skyrocketed during this period and drove working people to tribal, even fascistic politics in the West. It's also a period of social media dominance where unfiltered stories, mostly sensational and truthful, have a very large sway on the minds of the population to a point where truth and reasoned discourse have become increasingly difficult in our public life. This is a very difficult environment for an ideology such as liberalism that, at least in theory, relies on reasoned discussion to guide public life. Look at what is going on in the US and in the UK and the quality of public discourse in the past 4 years or so in the countries that were once considered the stalwarts of liberal democratic governance that others were supposed to emulate. As a Yale historian, Timothy Snyder intimated, the post-truth world that we currently live in is a pre-fascist world. The old assumption about the twin values of freedom and prosperity, unfortunately, erroneously measured by economic growth, that has fueled the dominance of liberalism in the past, is now seriously challenged by rapid economic growth in authoritarian countries such as China, which has become a convenient example for authoritarian regimes in developing countries to decouple liberty and prosperity. The foreign policy of the West, largely informed by the realist school, which insists on the primacy of economic liberalism at the expense of political and individual liberty, has also significantly degraded liberal ideologies' value as intellectuals in developing countries associated such policies as manifestations of Western hypocrisy. In other words, the dominance of liberalism as a source of soft power is largely spent. Noah Hariri goes even further and suggests that the last of the 3 ideologies that dominated our world in the 19th and 20th centuries, liberalism, is dead, and our world is currently without any organizing ideology. It is in this difficult global environment that we still insist on the importance of liberal democratic politics in Ethiopia as only with all the difficulties, mechanism to push our country towards a stable political order that is a necessary condition for addressing the accumulated economic and social problems that we must solve urgently. With this broad introduction, I will now quickly address the 4 questions posed by the organizers. The first one asks about the ambitions of IZEMA in the 2021 election. IZEMA's most important ambition at this stage is not centered around IZEMA per se. Our ambition is to ensure a free and fair and credible election for the first time in our country's history. While ensuring that the process works and works well is largely the responsibility of the government, ensuring security, avoiding all kinds of harassment of opposition candidates, especially in the regions, etc., as well as the proper and independent functioning of election-related institutions, such as Nega, the judiciary, the Attorney General's office, the Human Rights Commission, security apparatus, etc. We as opposition parties also have a significant role in ensuring that we play by the established rules and will not be cause for any kind of disturbance by cynically using the election platform for sowing discord within the community. If we can all do our part and ensure a really meaningful and credible election, we believe we all win in the long run, irrespective of who actually won this particular election. Sure, we'll play to win, and we'll work hard to win in this election. But we want to win by the strength of our vision and the policy positions we espouse, not by whipping emotions and false narratives. We know this is a very sensitive transition period that we should tread very carefully with an eye on the long-term systemic issues than the short-term victory. The second issue relates to what we think would be the key debates and issues framing this election. There are so many unresolved issues in our national life that this election will not be short of issues to debate. That is partly why I hope this election will be a meaningful battle of ideas on these issues than the usual debasement of ideas by way of smearing opponents on falsehoods and conspiracy theories to garner emotional support. In this election, there are both long-term issues related to the nature of the political community and its future legal and institutional posture, as well as short-term issues that determine the immediate future in political, economic, and social terms. These include, for example, the nature of the constitution and the kinds of changes that it needs to ensure a stable political community. Example, what kind of federalism, what kind of political system, parliamentary or presidential, the nature of the civil service, the politics of ethnicity versus the politics of citizenship within a broad democratic framework, etc. And lots of short-term policy-related issues dealing with the economy, as well as urgent social issues that need to be addressed, such as issues related to corruption and maladministration, education and health policy, food security and agricultural transformation, unemployment in general, and youth unemployment in particular, macroeconomic stability, glaring inequality, issues related to land policy and urban development, etc. We in IZEMA are preparing some 42 policy positions on a range of topics to put forward in this particular debate in the coming election. The third question relates to whether the politics of citizenship versus multicultural ideologies are going to be at the heart of this debate. As I said earlier, it sure is going to be one of the long-term issues we have to address that defines the future of our political community. I believe the debate will start in this election. I understand this can be an emotional issue for some, but it has to be debated rationally and with an eye to trying to understand the concerns of the other side of the debate to ensure that these topics are addressed within a clear understanding of the democratic agenda and the principles enshrined in it. What is critical is the degree to which all sides to the debate play by the rules of the democratic game than resort to violence to achieve their desired goals. I do believe linguistic and cultural concerns, as well as the desire to self-governance, can be addressed reasonably well within a well-functioning democratic dispensation without resorting to identity-based politics, whether on the basis of ethnicity or religion or any other marker. Our failed experiment with identity politics for the past 30 years and the various conflicts that it has engendered since then, but particularly in the past 3 years, should be a painful lesson for all of us to learn from. The fourth question that I was asked to address is whether there are potential parallels with the upcoming elections in relation to 2005. 2005 was a lost opportunity for our country. It failed because of the hubris of the then Prime Minister Mellis, as well as the inability of the whole ruling party, EPRDF, to accept defeat on the ballot box, as well as the support that the Mellis regime got from the West for its troubles of forcefully squashing the democratic aspirations of the people. Maybe they thought we were not ready for democracy yet. In any case, this partly emanates from the difficulty, nay, the impossibility of an ethnic-based minority government to stay in power legitimately through the democratic process. In 2005, Mellis and his group decided that democracy will not work if they are to stay in power. They decided that force and intimidation is the only way to stay in power and use this power to unduly benefit from the resources of a large multinational country. Unfortunately, that can only be a short-term proposition, as we can see now. Eventually, a violent, humiliating end is the final fate of such a system. I hope the Abiy government learns from these historic mistakes. That and the mistaken premise that the West will side with democracies, the fatal mistake that the opposition made in 2005, as a matter of principle, are the key lessons of 2005 in my view. Let me conclude by saying a few words to my compatriots. As messy as democracy is, or democratic politics can be, if the broad human experience is anything to go by, there is no better political system yet that could provide us with the necessary political stability and freedom to seriously address our economic, social, and governance-related problems. In my lifetime, we have seen the problems of unbridled power with the monarchy, the horrors of left-wing dictatorship with the Derg, and the divisive, brutal, and corrupt dictatorship that comes with ethnic politics with TPLF. None of these systems obviously work for peace, stability, and prosperity and met a tragic end. This is our chance to turn the page and move towards a more accountable, fair, and equitable democratic governance. We are not going to get there if we think this is some kind of Western project that will be delivered by the good graces of the West. We have observed where the values of Western governments lie when the choice is between power and principle in 2005. This time around, we should take this as our own project, a system that we need, irrespective of the ideological turmoil that we see in the West, for our stability and eventually for an equitable prosperity that balances the issue of equity and efficiency. We need to strive for a principled unity that comes from a deep understanding that we are equal citizens that live in a multi-religious, multicultural society. We have fought and won again against foreign aggression and imposed tyranny in the past as a united people, only to succumb to all kinds of domestically motivated tyranny. It is time to unite again to form a truly free society that treats each one of us as equal citizens. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Professor Nega. Well, that concludes the presentation.